Good morning. We are Sofia.
And Alexander.
We're here this morning to present to you our diploma thesis, Studenthuset, a student housing project situated in the eastern part of Stockholm, Garnisonen, Östermalm.
We propose to add a student housing structure to a pre-existing property, Kvarteret Garnisonen 3, a property very much characterized by the commercial office nature of its current program. Outside of office hours, the area dies down.
We believe that this proposal, with the help of the 336 students who inhabit it, will foster a more vibrant and lively neighborhood, stimulating activity more inspiring than the light bulbs of the neighboring offices.
By providing housing for a third of 1,000 students, that is more than half of KTH architecture schools, and creating a vibrant and bustling community of young and engaged residents, we hope to give life not only to the property, but to the neighborhood as a whole.
In our design choices, we have been guided by the endeavor to architecturally stimulate human interactions. In addition to the life that takes place in the students' apartments and their shared amenities, we want to encourage life in 3 additional spatial realms of the buildings.
1. We want to encourage life on the street level, underneath the buildings.
2. We want to encourage life in between the buildings, in the wind-shielded in-between spaces by the stairwell wells.
3. And we want to encourage life on top of the buildings, on the public roof landscape.
We would like to further explain how we have architecturally tried to encourage life in these spatial realms. But first we want to briefly describe the history of the site and contemporary topics relating to the property, to better understand our position for the proposal.
Kvarteret Garnisonen 3 is a large property of 84,000 square meters in land area, completely owned by the public pension fund-controlled real estate company Vasakronan. Historically, this area has been property of the Crown, and especially associated with His Majesty's military. In the 1880s, 2 garrison complexes were constructed for the King's 2 lifeguard regiments. Almost all of the property of today was encircled by the garrisons, with the respective exercise courtyards in the centers, only excluding the southern-oriented strip, from where the 2 regiments launched their ceremonial parades to the royal castle. Since 1952, when the last regiment moved out of the building, the defunct military complex faced a series of significant changes. Of most interest to us, the southern-oriented strip, where we have situated our student housing proposal, transformed from a ceremonial parade launching space into a mundane collection of parking lots. The rest of the complex also saw significant restructuring, with the northern half of the buildings demolished and the exercise courtyards yielding for the construction of new buildings for military research and private offices. Had the principal plan for the continued sanitizing of the city, called City 67, still have been in effect, the southern half of the garrison complex would have been demolished and replaced as well, along with all of the pre-modernistic buildings in the vicinity, but a much less radical City Plan 1977 overruled this. Since then, there has been no significant architectural changes to the plot, beyond the addition of a roof terrace and solar panels.
As such, there are today 3 buildings standing on the property. 1, the old army barracks from the late 1880s, designed by E.A. Jakobsson, the interior of which has been heavily modified during the conversion to office spaces. 2, the so-called Thesis, designed by Gustav Kaunitz, previously used as a research facility for the military, built in 1963, now used for offices. 3, the structuralistic mastodon, Karlahuset, designed by Tage Hertzell, built in 1972. Its ideological mission was to diminish the hierarchical ordering of the offices spaces between company ranks by inhabiting the spaces in an equal grid of 9.6 times 7.2 meters. In 2022, Karlahuset celebrated 50 years since it's being built, and Vasakronan hails it as an architectural gemstone, branded as the standard-bearer of Garnisonen's motto, "Not for everyone, but perhaps for you."
Entering contemporary discourses, Vasakronan has been in talks with Stockholms stad to further develop the property, which today only consists of offices, services and stores, garages and parking spaces. As early as 2018, a plan agreement between Vasakronan and the city was reached to allow work for a new detailed plan. The plan agreement mentions such additions such as a hotel, a school and housing. When we ask Vasakronan directly on the phone, they state that no details can be communicated, since everything still very much is in private dialogue with the city. However, some of their general intentions have been relayed through the media. Anna Nyberg, head of real estate development of Vasakronan, has stated that they want to add content that contribute to adding life to the area outside of office hours, and that first and foremost, we are talking about housing by the part towards Linnégatan. In the property news magazine Fastighetsvärlden, it is mentioned that the addition of housing could mean 200 to 250 apartments.
With the future of the property still being shaped, and with intention to bring life into the office-dominated character of the site, this is our position for the proposal. We propose the addition of a fourth building on the site, or actually a narrow pair of buildings along the proximity of Linnégatan, a student housing complex accommodating 336 students and bringing life under, in between and over the buildings.
The area we claim for this student housing project is the southern-oriented strip where once the Royal Lifeguards launched their ceremonial parades from, but which nowadays primarily is used for parking spaces and dog walking. We want to dare to use this very central space in Stockholm to accommodate a multitude of students within reach of many universities. There are over 25 college campi within half an hour of bicycling from Garnisonen, so the residents could be enrolled in many different universities, encouraging vocational diversity among the residents.
Now returning to our design choices and how they correspond with the endeavor to encourage life underneath the buildings, in between them and on the roof landscape. To promote spontaneous social interactions between residents, visitors and passers-by at different levels, 4 principles have guided us.
Principle 1. Pilotis. By lifting the bulk of the buildings up above ground level, we allow for life underneath the buildings to take place.
Principle 2. Access galleries and in-between spaces. Access galleries stretch out along the whole length of the building, and wind-shielded in-between spaces are placed in conjunction to stairwells. Here you can meet your neighbors and hang out.
Principle 3. Half-story high changes in levels. By shifting the buildings half a story vertically, we allow for a more spread-out visual connection to the other levels, increasing the probability you'll be able to connect with someone on the other side. This is an inspiration from Herman Hertzberger's innovative experimental housing in Delft that we encountered during our Dutch structuralism research.
Principle 4. Accessible roof landscape. The roof is a public open space programmed with an outdoor gym, cafe, soapbox theater, greenhouses and planter boxes, and a small öppna förskola and preschool, all to stimulate a living roof environment. This is comparable to realized projects such as the High Line in New York, where an elevated walkway offers the public a scenic route through the city above street level.
While these 4 principles guided us for the design of the structure as a whole, for the planning of the student apartments and shared amenities, we utilized a grid of 4.8 times 4.8 meters, inferred from the beam span distance between the underlying Pilotis pillar grid. The grid size of 4.8 times 4.8 meters, half the length of Karlahuset's 9.6 times 7.2 meters, allowed us to fit the program into 2 narrow strips of buildings. For the student accommodations, we have designed 5 different apartment typologies in 2 distinct categories. The first category, consisting only of apartment type A, is a student corridor room of 9 square meters, with 2 rooms for each grid unit, with kitchen, toilets and showers externalized in a shared set of amenities, shared between student residents in a corridor. This category generally populates the northern building. For the corridor rooms, the sets of amenities, showers, kitchen, toilets, are shared between 8 to 14 students, with a mean of 11 students per 5 showers, 12 kitchen seats and 6 toilets. The number of students per corridor segment is larger than the statistical mean of 9 students per corridor, 6 to 12 within one standard deviation, range of 4 to 14, of 10 sample student corridor accommodation posts. But while Studenthuset has a larger corridor community than conventional, the number of toilets and showers per student is more generous, with approximately 1 shower and 1 toilet for every 2 student residents. So we hope that the corridor rooms of Studenthuset can offer an even more communal feeling while still maintaining an adequate level of cleanliness.
The second category, consisting of the rest of the apartment types, type B through E, is a student apartment category with amenities internalized in the plan layout. This category generally populates the southern building. Type B and C share 3 grid units, with Type B having a 23 square meter area and a 5 square meter balcony, while Type C being wheelchair accessible having a 39 square meter area, as well as a balcony and a separate bedroom. Type D and E take up 1 grid size each, which Type D having a 25 square meter area and an extra large kitchen, and Type E having a 18 square meter area and a balcony.
We have actively chosen not to include in-between categories, such as the so-called doublet, where 2 students have their own separate bedroom but share kitchen and bathroom, because we want the students to be able to choose between the relative autonomy in a social complex of the student apartment and the nearly full-on communal living of the student corridor, without settling on the in-between option of the doublet, which comes with only a pseudo-communal portion of shared living with the full loss of autonomy. The students should be able to socialize in any shared space of the complex and in the private rooms at the residents' own discretion.
The program of the proposal includes 204 corridor rooms of Type A and 132 student apartments of the other types, for a total of 336 accommodated students. 11 of the apartments, a little more than 3%, are wheelchair accessible. There are 108 shared restrooms, there are 90 shared showers, there are 216 shared kitchen seats, there are 22 shared laundry rooms, there are 11 shared group rooms, there is a sauna, there is one gym, there is 1 yoga room, and there's 1 reception hall in 2 levels, there is 1 atelier in 2 levels, there is 1 rehearsing studio, there is 1 study hall, there is 1 cinema room.
To fit this program, we chose to have 3 floors for the northern building and 2 floors for the southern building. This was a middle ground decision, since 1 set of floors fewer made it difficult to fit the program, and 1 set of floors more drastically obscured the direct sunlight on the offices of the barracks building.
With the program described, we will now explore the building for 2 imaginative students living in the student house. Elsa wakes up in a corridor room's loft bed. An exciting day awaits her, so she puts on her slippers and checks on the state of her potted plant in the interior hallway. Her corridor friend Clara greets her good morning. Then she heads for a quick shower, and afterwards grabs her pre-prepared breakfast from the shared kitchen room. Clara sits by the kitchen table, and they talk about the plans of the evening. She returns back to her room, gets properly dressed, and then heads out through the front door to do some grocery shopping for her graduation party, which she will host in the facility's reception hall this afternoon.
A couple of hours later, there is a knock on Elias's door. Of course, he had almost forgotten. Yesterday, at the movie night in the facility's cinema room, he had invited 2 neighbors to come over to his place the next morning. He had promised to teach his 2 new friends the card game that was played in the movie they saw, Rummy. "Hello, please come in and sit down. I will just do some quick dishwashing. Sorry for the mess, guys."
Meanwhile, Elsa is back from her grocery shopping day, arriving from Linnégatan. She walks up the pillar hall slope with her heavy bags, nodding and smiling to familiar faces as they pass by in a slow pace. This Saturday, As every Saturday there's a renowned flea market hosted on ground level under the pilotis pillar grid of the Studenthuset. It makes the place bustling with activity every weekend, and Elsa usually stops by to look on the second-hand trinkets at display. But today she goes straight to her room and continues with the planning for the evening festivities.
Elias taught his new friends the rummy card game so well that he was actually relieved when they left, since he kept losing all over and over again. He fetches his sports bike from the balcony and leads it through the access gallery to the elevator by the stairwell. Another couple of friends are lounging in the in-between space next by. He waves to them and takes the elevator down.
Now we want to talk a little bit more about the architecture of the proposal, structurally and aesthetically.
Structurally, the well-insulated and load-bearing wall and slab system is primarily a light beam structure, inspired by the relatively low cost and reasonable span distance for our 4.8 times 4.8 pillar grid. Glulam beams and pillars support the light beam structure, and laminated veneer lumber beams are used both for reinforcing the light beams and accommodating a suitable position of the vapor barrier.
Aesthetically, we pondered upon the notion about what can be uniquely achieved with such a long facade as we propose, 355 meters long. It surpasses Karlahuset 347 meters, and would thus be Sweden's longest facade. What we settled upon was to design a color gradient along the facade with individual colors, one for each grade unit, for a total of 74 unique colors in a 355 meter long gradient. We selected colors from the RAL standard palette to make sure that the corrugated metal plates can be painted in a designated gradient. The division of the facade into individual colors along a gradient also helps in navigating to the general whereabouts of a certain apartment in the complex, as well as promoting a sense of individuality of the residents. Glass blocks, acrylic blocks cemented with grout and reinforced by metal frames, are heavily used as a wind-shielded element for the staircases between the access galleries, as well as for the balconies. Our use of this material was inspired by the Eglon House in London, which uses them extensively to create shielded but atmospherically lit spaces. The interior facades use wooden paneling, naked glulam pillars, and wooden slats to create a more warm, open environment. The entrance doors of the apartments are painted in the same color as the particular grid unit's exterior facade color.
Studenthuset bears some architectural resemblance to several other large-scale urban housing projects. One example in the southwestern periphery of suburban Rome is Il Serpentone of Corviale, a nearly 1 kilometer long housing project with 1,200 apartments, with the longest continuous facade being 546 meters long. It was built in the years 1973 to 1982, designed by a team headed by Mario Fiorentino. Fiorentino envisioned his mammoth housing machine to be a self-regulating community, but in reality it was quickly marred with squatters and disrepair. Only a few months after completion, 700 families were illegally occupying spaces intended for public services, and due to the abandonment by the authorities, these public spaces were never reconquered. Contemporary proposals for Corviale, such as the one put forth by Laura Peretti Architects, mandates a reclamation of these public spaces, opening up access routes between one side of the building and the other, and increasing the frequency of entrances from one every 200 meters to every 37 meters.
Studenthuset has a program with a public access rooftop landscape, allows free movement underneath the buildings thanks to its pilotis principle, and has a mean distance of 44 meters between entrance points.
Another large-scale housing example is the Vele di Scampia, situated in the commuter town of Scampia in the far north of Naples. Designed by Frans di Salvo and built in the years 1962 to 1975, it housed between 40,000 and 70,000 people in 7 massive sail-shaped apartment complexes. No exact number of residents can be stated, since it did not last long until the Neapolitan mafia organization, the Camorra, took control over the area and used the Vele as their base of operations for drug trade. The Camorra installed their own personal locked gates for the complex to allow drug dealers to evade the police. The idea behind the Vele was to provide a huge public housing project where hundreds of families would socialize and create a community, and public spaces such as a park, playing fields, and shared facilities were planned. But the plans for public spaces were not carried out due to construction being halted before completion, due to funds being embezzled. And in reality, due to the Camorra seizing control and due to many families displaced by the earthquake in 1980, illegally occupying the apartments, and due to a long period of a total lack of police presence, the complex turned into a crime haven, marred with drug trafficking, illegal street races, gang violence, and fencing of stolen goods. In 2020, the demolition of the complex was initiated after delays due to discovery of asbestos in the construction. The removal of the Vele, which had turned into a symbol of the Camorra, is still in process.
Studenthuset will house 336 students, university enrolled, which, if under similar workload as architecture students, will leave no time for crime. We also believe Vasakronan to take their mission as landlords very seriously, and should they require assistance with any serious matter, the nearest police station is 4 kilometers away. And perhaps most importantly, the public spaces on the roof and the public park underneath the buildings are designed to be attractive for many visitors and passers-by, which we hope will add to the number of eyes on the street and avert any gang to base their operations here.
In a closing statement, we initially started smaller.
But the more our project was aligned to the ideal of architecturally stimulating human interactions, the more important it became to actually accommodate a multitude of such humans. Without bountiful humans, no cluster of human interactions. One could very much imagine this area sprawling with life and bustling with activity thanks to 336 students residents, but would more strenuously do so with merely 36 students living here. Architecture without humans would only be a restructuring of materials. We want to bring life to the site.
Thus, we opted for the large-scale student housing project that we here have presented, since we envision it to be a bustling hub of human interactivity, and that is the point of our diploma thesis.
We would like to thank our tutors, Per and Fredrik, for guiding us to be bold and overcoming our own architectural inhibitions, and we thank our colleagues for valuable input.
And we thank our son, Manfred, who through his patience and persistence at preschool has given us 5 days a week to prepare for this moment.
And we thank you who have taken part of this presentation for your time.
Now, let the discussions commence.